When you talk about technology, especially today in cybersecurity, more specifically, it's really hard for any curriculum to catch up, especially a university, right? Even Microsoft is struggling to keep up with curriculum for their own,
Yeah.
products. And we have a team of folks here that are trying to get certified and learn more about products, so there's just no curriculum out yet, and there's no official testing out yet. So it's very fluid.
Welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Microsoft Mentors is designed to lift the lid on the journeys of the most successful leaders in the Microsoft partner ecosystem. Every week, through candid conversations with founders, business owners, and technology thought leaders, we explore their strategies, grit, and lessons behind their growth and how they're building competitive advantage for the future. These are the untold stories and practical lessons from leaders who are defining success in Azure, AI, data, app innovation, and security. Our mission is simple: to tell partner stories at scale and create impactful Microsoft conversations.
You got
Hello
it.
and welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Today I'm joined by Shane Gronniger over in sunny Austin, Texas. How you doing, Shane?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. So Shane is the CEO of GCS Technologies. I mean, I guess, Shane, for anyone that doesn't know you, be good just to get a quick 60 seconds on who you are and who GCS are, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Well, like you said, I'm Shane. I'm the CEO here at GCS. We are a managed IT cybersecurity services provider in Austin, Texas. We're 25 years in business and support a lot of small, medium-sized businesses here in the community, Central Texas, and really beyond across the country. But have a really deep focus and specialization in the Microsoft stack, specifically the security stack, 365, Azure. And so, yeah, we've built a really meaningful service and successful service around it, and love talking about how we're doing things and talking shop, right? And of course, all of the innovation and new things that are popping up everywhere every day. So
Yeah, well, that's one of the most exciting things about the Microsoft world, isn't it? Is that there's never 2 weeks are the same. There's always something new, something to learn, something to understand, and um, that's what makes it exciting, but probably also quite challenging when you're trying to run a business in that space, right?
yeah, absolutely, right. There's name changes. We go from Intune to Endpoint Manager, from Azure AD to Entra to, compliance to Purview, and some of those names have gone back and forth. And then there's add-ons. There's a lot to keep up with. The licensing model is pretty deep and pretty wide. And so, we joke that you got to have a PhD in Microsoft licensing sometimes to understand that,
Yeah.
but we understand it really well, right? And it's fun to translate that to our customers and help them understand it too. There's a million different options. There's four or five usually routes that make sense, and we just try to help them find obviously the ones that are most cost effective, but the ones that are most impactful, to the business as well. So, uh,
100%. And I guess if we sort of swing it back to you and draw the clock all the way back to the start of Shane's tech career, um, I guess is tech a route that you always saw yourself going down? You know, were you a bedroom developer pulling PCs apart in your bedroom? Was it something that you actually ended up doing by chance? What did that sort of early route look like for you?
yeah, all of the above. I was always a tinkerer, always had an interest in computers. I was around when 486s were out and Apple IIe's, and so I did a lot of computer builds and, back in the day, bedroom builds, and when cable modems and, routers came out, and figuring out what IP addresses were, and that's just a natural kind of curiosity and interest. And so that led me into, engineering school at university here, University of Texas, which I ultimately abandoned to join a ragtag group of gentlemen that we all were kind of a part of the same circle, and started an MSP. And that was GCS Technologies back in the year 2000, 2001, 2002. And so over that time, we've just slowly, organically grown, into a pretty sophisticated, mature, business with some um, some pretty mature offerings too. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. I've always, and I'm still very close to the tech. I'm more of a technologist, I would say, at heart than I am a CEO, right? But many CEOs in my seat and MSPs like us, didn't go to business school. They didn't, train in executive groups. They started a business, right? And they took their trade and what they were good at, and they paired that with, the soft skills required to go sell to market, right? To build relationships with customers. And so here we are 25 years later. It's hard to believe. Time
What a
flies,
journey,
but
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
It's interesting as well. Spoken to quite a lot of leaders that either didn't go to university, so they either went straight into tech through sort of apprenticeship type routes, or like yourself, got maybe part way through university and actually just found that there were better routes for them, and actually getting into industry quicker was a better fit. But for you and the guys that you set up GCS with. So it was very much out of that early education and straight into, almost skipping going and working for other businesses. And let's just take what we know and start building ourselves from scratch from day one then.
yeah, yeah, trial by fire, and I think we've learned a lot of business lessons along the way, obviously. We're still learning them
Yeah.
every day, as we continuously try to improve. But yeah, we often joke that we've probably earned 2 or 3 MBAs at this point, and not to devalue the university, studies and curriculum. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there, especially around business, and things I wish, we wish we would have learned earlier on, right? But when you talk about technology, especially today in cybersecurity, more specifically, it's really hard for any curriculum to catch up, especially a university, right? Even Microsoft is struggling to keep up with curriculum for their own,
Yeah.
products. And we have a team of folks here that are trying to get certified and learn more about products. So there's just no curriculum out yet, and there's no official testing out yet. So it's very fluid. So yeah, a lot of us founding members here, and really a lot of the team is just they're technologists by trade. And I think one thing that we look for when we look for really good people is curiosity. If you're not curious, then you're probably not going to continue that learning path as much as others might.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important to stay relevant, right? In what we do. So
Yeah. And I guess for you guys setting up, what did those first few years look like? Was it just literally getting out, talking to potential clients and sort of building credibility to win those initial pieces of business then, I guess?
yeah, yeah, it was, we know a few people that were in businesses, my friend's buddy is the CEO at this company, a little small startup. They need help, with XYZ. We'd lick and stamp flyers, and just go knock on doors and go join networking lunches and groups and breakfasts. And, those things certainly helped. And a lot of this is, for I think anyone in that bootstrap startup phase, there's a lot of luck involved. But there's also opportunity, and you just have to know when to look for it. So it's not all luck, obviously. You got to be there, and you got to be ready and hungry and willing to go after it. But I think also it's doing good work. It's leaving a good legacy behind. It's generating referrals. And so today, if you look at us, we don't really have a very large, sophisticated marketing engine, or lead gen or prospect engine. We don't have, traditional salespeople out beating the streets. Our sales engine, our marketing engine, I believe, is working for us every day through our
Yeah.
interactions with our clients, right? And so the better work we do, we've typically bucked the trend of a typical MSP over the years of requiring, fixed fee contracts. And, we feel like we got to earn that business every single day. And that's worked really well for us. And we have clients that are here 10, 15 years now. Um, and they never once signed a piece of paper saying that they had to commit to us for even 1 year, but they're here, so I think that speaks volumes. But yeah, it's pretty simple. We think, just do good work, take care of people, build that trust, get to know them as well, and the rest usually falls into place.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
hire the right people, and make sure that they have the competencies and skill sets, obviously too. So
Yeah, and I guess that mindset that you guys started with, as the industry that you work within has evolved and developed, whereas before there was a lot more service provider lock in. You know, if they've put
yeah,
the infrastructure in place, they own the switches on your in your offices or whatever. There was a lot more lock in the past, whereas you get to where we're at now with consumption based cloud computing, and that lock in isn't really there, and they can quite easily pick up their the CSP agreements that they have with you and take them to another provider, down the road the next month. So actually that
yeah.
mindset mentality that we started with now is probably, so deeply ingrained as you as an organization that's serving you even better now that the industry has moved to that type of operating model.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's very insightful because, yeah, MSPs, especially traditionally, when we're looking at break fix, we're looking at infrastructure support. To run a business and to standardize your processes, right? It's pretty important to standardize the stack. And
Yeah.
so what that means is every client you meet has to align to your stack, ideally. And, that there's a good business model there. It's been proven out. There's a lot of people that have been very successful doing that, but, it's pretty sticky business too. Uh, and yeah, we talk to our clients a lot now about the fact that when, because we're in the business of managing very much these days, managing Microsoft digital estates, right? Tenancies. And so, it's a good story for us to tell when we talk to clients, especially coming from a traditional MSP. When we have one right now we're working with where, the firewalls, the infrastructure, everything was included in that old contract. And so they want more ownership. And they're more cloud now. To your point, this is the footprint is vastly different, but they still have physical offices. They still have to reinvent the infrastructure. But they're going to reinvent it in such a way that it's their stack. It's one that we support and recommend, right? But it's universally supported. We kind of refer to it as a main street solution, meaning that a competent, MSP out there, whether they're specialized in Microsoft or can take this over and support it. But you, as the customer, own it. And so if you think about a Microsoft tenant, that's exactly how it works. We're co-managing these tenants, right? We're dropping an admin account in there so we can audit and maintain our functions, our activities. We're dropping licenses in there, right? And maybe as a CSP, and there are hooks there, right? If a customer commits to an annual commit NCE, subscription set, then they are logged
Yeah.
in, right, to pay that. But there's also ways to transfer those subscriptions to other CSPs too. So anyway, it's yeah, and more so than ever, you're right. We have to earn the business. And the MSPs out there that have rested their laurels or have built their models really around that stickiness are having to, or will have to reinvent themselves to some degree. So we feel like we're in a pretty good spot there because yeah, we're doing something that's very portable. And so while it may not be sticky, I would argue that the stickiness doesn't come in the contract because those can always be litigated out of, right? In many
Yeah.
cases, the stickiness for us comes with people don't want to leave. They like us, they like working with us, they keep calling us back, and they refer us most importantly, right? So back to we don't have a sales engine, we're referral based, and we like that. We like that a lot. I mean, that does not to say we don't try to get out there. We do a lot of events, and we, are always happy to participate in podcasts and just thought leader type of activities, right? So we can show people as well that part of what we're doing, obviously, is we're a business. We're trying to make money. We have a service, but we're also really trying to educate the community, and community also being our customers, right? And I think there's a big part of rapport and trust building and client retention when you take the time to try to educate them, instead of playing this Wizard of Oz type of role right behind a curtain where we just push buttons and take care of things. And, we have a lot of curious clients and they want to know more. And that's good. The more engagement we see, the better. We certainly
Yeah.
have those clients out there, right, that they just want to pay the bill every month and have it taken care of. And that's great. But the more engagement we can have back and forth, usually the better, the more effective we can be too.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And I guess so. You obviously started the business with the three of you. Um, at what point did the business start to develop into more of a mature operating model where you've got, multiple headcount employees, you've got multiple clients in different guises. When did it start to sort of hit that maturity level? What sort of time frame from starting to then did that take, do you think?
Yeah, it's probably, the first 5 years or so. Within the first 5 years, I'd say 2005 to 2010, we had our first physical office. We were, up to that 10, 12, 13 employee mark for the first time. Had a real set of customers, a real business, functioning. Um, and then, yeah, we just kind of organically grew it from there, grew our office space. And then, started getting more into industry specific peer groups where we could meet with other MSP owners and businesses around the country and share notes and compare and also get some benchmarks too that were important to us in terms of what's best in class in our industry, right?
Yeah,
The profit margins, the revenue targets, all that kind of stuff for, say, a SaaS business are vastly different than, a services business like us. So, that helped us mature. And there's also a concept of operational maturity model that many of us and our peers follow. And so, we kind of tracked along there and really we had a great group. The group's evolved. People have come and gone over the years, right? The leadership group and whatnot. Um, but we we're always good at holding each other accountable and challenging each other, right, in the right ways. And so beating things up, getting into offsite strategy meetings for a day or two, and really looking at the business, inside out, upside down. And
yeah,
us as MSPs have to reinvent ourselves every 4 or 5 years, right? We had virtualization, which really changed things a lot. We had cloud, UCaaS or voice over IP, phone systems going to cloud. Now we've, uh, cybersecurity. And so, to stay relevant, we have to, again, going back to the continuous learning, being close to the technology, being curious, those are the kinds of things that are important and have allowed us to continue to evolve. And our biggest evolution, I would say, happened, around COVID or post-COVID when the world
yeah,
changed, for everybody. And so that's where we really had reinvented ourselves, and that's where we really positioned ourselves more along this managed Microsoft cloud path. Um,
yeah. It's
yeah,
interesting on the cyber and cloud security side of things, because I think, if you looked back 5, 6, 7 years ago, um, a lot of security within Microsoft ecosystem had to put in a lot of third party tools still to support.
yeah,
And Microsoft had really changed the dial there, whereas now you can be pretty Microsoft native on your security stack alongside your Microsoft infrastructure and modern work stack as well, can't you? So there's been a big shift there in terms of the products and services that Microsoft have on a security standpoint.
huge. Yeah, huge. And it's as much a tools consolidation story that we tell our customers now, as it is talking about the point solution, right? Whether it's endpoint or identity, yeah, it used to be siloed solutions. We'd all go and get the best in class we could, and stitch these things together. And there's still a lot of MSPs that operate in that model. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? They're good products, there's a lot of really great non-Microsoft security tools out there. And if they're patched together in the right ways, they're phenomenal. Um, but if you look at making a business, monetizing that as a service business, right? Building a model around that, it's a little harder. There's vendor management. Your attack surface is much larger now with all these different vendors at play. We've seen a lot of breaches, right? That keeps
Yeah,
us all up at night. These tools that have their hooks into various things, or customer environments. But yeah, we realized pretty quickly, back in 2020, 2021, that yeah, like there's a lot of stuff under that Microsoft hood that can really do everything that we were doing with these tools and actually can do it even better. And it's just a subscription. We can turn it on. It's right there. It's underneath the hood already. So, in a lot of ways, it was surveying our customers. And again, as an MSP serving small, medium-sized businesses, the vast majority of them are in Microsoft 365. They still have some
yeah,
servers, right? And we're helping them move those to Azure or go serverless, right? But yeah, we it was apparent to us that if we meet our customers where they are, which is in the Microsoft cloud, and we can turn on and leverage some of these tools and make them work, that we can actually get rid of some of these third-party pieces that truthfully aren't doing as good of a job. And, we've been around a long time, like I said. And so for years, Microsoft, our relationship with them as a Microsoft partner was that's where we get our licenses from. We're doing small business server and user CALs and remote desktop CALs and Exchange server upgrades. And that's what we all did for a big part of our careers. We never once considered Microsoft to be a security company. They weren't back then,
Yeah.
obviously. They didn't really have any security products, but it's really amazing to see how they've evolved and changed over the last, decade. Obviously with different leadership in place and the focus that they had, vision they had, that they even, said a long, long time ago, we're going to go cloud. They really have done it, and it's amazing to see the where they are on the security landscape. I mean, if you look at endpoint protection, if you look at identity access management, if you look at unified device management, if you look at cloud access security brokers, I mean, almost every meaningful category, Microsoft's winning awards, and whether you pay attention or not to Gartner and Forrester and those kinds of uh, reports, Microsoft is a leader. And
Yeah.
and we can say firsthand too. I mean, the efficacy of these tools has been amazing as well. So, so
And
yeah,
when you
we're
when you're going through those sort of discussions internally about that shift in operating model and really pushing towards a Microsoft first service model, were there sort of any reservations from your side in terms of potential, opportunity cost of walking away from maybe some of those vendors that you'd worked with in the past, not being able to provide that to customers and going much sort of narrow in terms of the technology solutions that you're taking to customers? I guess there's a potential risk that then means that there's a subset of customers that you won't be able to access because they want something different. Did it feel like there was a trade-off risk there, or did it always feel like the Microsoft route would pay the dividend anyway?
yeah, good question. And yeah, certainly it's a concern. We didn't make a clean cut like, okay, we're only doing this going forward. We just made a clear decision that that's what we're going to lead with.
Yeah,
And that's where most of our customers will convert to. I mean, we definitely have a population of clients that are in Google Workspace and will forever be in Google, and they have good reason to, both technically, culturally. Like there's that's not a hill for us to die on.
yeah,
But the neat story about this too is that, yeah, Google Workspace, we don't really care where you do your email and collaboration. We think Microsoft has a better ecosystem there, but look, if there's schools, there's businesses that are just ingrained into that. But what Google doesn't, or at least hasn't provided as well in terms of keeping up with Microsoft, is the device management, the endpoint security, just all of the various layers that Microsoft has done really, really well at. So, and Microsoft has designed their tools in such a way that we can cast a net over a Google Workspace environment. This is a multi-cloud solution, right? So when we talk about the security capabilities that come with the Microsoft stack that we're using, they also translate into, right, these environments that have Google or Dropbox, right, or whatever it may be that they're using. We can still get some good protection there. So we haven't turned our backs, but yeah, if somebody comes to our doorstep and they specifically want, this third party endpoint solution, in conjunction with this third party security awareness training platform, like that's just not something we really do anymore, right?
yeah,
We can still resell. We're still in some cases partnered with these shops because we still service renewals, and look, we'll onboard customers that are on a unique stack like that with the intention that they want to aggregate more into Microsoft, but it's going to take 6 months or a year,
yeah,
right? So there's a need for us to understand and support those eclectic, just environments, or not more non-standardized environments for a period of time while we get them standardized. So.
yeah,
So yeah, but you're right, we look at this strategically too. At some point, as a business, it may make sense to really turn off certain revenue streams, right? That are now just much less strategic and are, if anything, distracting us, right, from this holistic approach of going pure Microsoft managed, environments.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so, but
And
but back, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
as I was just saying, and as you've sort of been through that evolution, the business has obviously grown alongside that. So, in terms of like current state of play, what does the business look like now in terms of headcount? What's the sort of size of the organisation from the three ragtags that left uni together to where it's at now?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have some gray in our beards. That's been a change. I think I did have hair at one point when we started. Um, we're about 45 employees total, give or take. And yeah, we service, hundreds of customers, big and small. We've got, the small plumbing shop down the street all the way to major league sports teams, multi-location banks, professional services firms, retail. So we started with a handful of pretty small customers and maybe one big, right? And now we're pretty well diversified. So,
Yeah,
um, but from a revenue standpoint, yeah, we're pretty large in comparison to most, MSPs. Getting to the size that we are takes a long time, and usually
yeah,
doesn't happen without a lot of M&A or merger acquisition, stuff going on. And so that's another feather in our cap as well, is that we're still 100%, privately held
yeah,
and in control of our own destiny. And still very much building. We've got plans to keep organically growing the business and uh, and trying to differentiate ourselves in the market as best we can, as being the best at what we do, and being fun and easy to work with as well.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And through that sort of growth journey to where you're at now, because obviously you're a self-confessed technologist at heart. So I guess as a business organisationally, how have you found still keeping yourself really embedded into the technology side of things, but then also being able to help the business to mature and develop in terms of operations, process, talent and people. How do you sort of manage that balance between your tech passion and also
yeah.
the operational side of the business?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't always balance it very well, right? As you can imagine. I mean, I kind of stretch where I need to. It's been a fun experience for me, so far, in just building my leadership skills and capabilities. I mean, I led folks and teams here throughout the years, but took the CEO mantle about 4 years ago, and um, I've always been a product technology focused guy, and that's really truthfully a big part of our success today, and going forward, our continued success is going to rely on not just me but our team being curious and taking the time, to do the research and development, right, to evolve our products and capabilities and service offerings. So yeah, I follow podcasts quite a bit. I spend a lot of time, online, mostly in the after hours, just researching. And again, it's not a task or chore for me. It's just a curiosity thing, and people might spend an hour or two in the evening, on YouTube or online, just watching whatever it is they're interested in, which I will do too. More than half the time, what I'm interested in is, my wife would probably look at my feed and be like, "Oh, another Microsoft podcast." Like, how boring. I was like,
Yeah,
well, they're talking about, this new thing. I'm interested in it. Um, and so, and I guess ultimately, because I've had asked myself this question too, and people have asked me, why do you like technology as much? I think it's because it can solve some really hard problems and some really interesting problems. And ultimately, I really enjoy connecting the technology with people and solving that problem, right? And so learning and looking at these little nuggets and things that are happening are just they're little answers, right? They're little ways that we can take that to market and solve problems for people. So, um,
yeah, yeah. And,
but
and I guess with
but
how the business has grown organically, and the fact that you know you're still privately owned, you're have got that passion for keeping technology at the heart of the organization. Yes, obviously it's a commercial business and you've got to hit your commercial figures, but you're not necessarily serving a higher entity that has to hit a certain number to get return on investment or whatever. You can be really clear about, well, what are we passionate about? What technologies do we think are going to give the most value and unlock the most value for our customers? And you can really
Yeah.
keep technology at the heart of that and build the business to be profitable and grow organically outside of that, can't you, I guess? I thought we'd take a very quick break from this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast, to just talk a little bit about why the podcast and the community that it serves is so important to us as part of our purpose here at Cloud Decisions and the purpose it drives within the wider Microsoft ecosystem. We've been involved here at Cloud Decisions in the Microsoft ecosystem for over a decade now, working with Microsoft partners and businesses with strong alignment to Microsoft technologies and their technology teams to help them to grow and scale their teams in cloud, security, data, and AI. For the past year, we've been working really hard behind the scenes to develop 2 core talent solutions that are built with our customers in mind and enable Microsoft-aligned businesses to access the talent they need to grow and scale their teams and ultimately hit their business objectives. We've developed CDX, our own proprietary talent intelligence system that uses custom AI, large language models and natural language processing to enable you as an organization, as a technology leader, to make insight-led technology decisions on all of your permanent hires and gives us the data that we really need to take your role to market to execute the search. We've also been working with customers here in the UK and in the US through Global Source, our global talent solution that is built to enable organizations to build borderless technology teams for permanent contract and flexible outsourced resources. So if you're a Microsoft partner or you are a technology leader within a business with a strong Microsoft technology alignment, and you'd like to know a little bit more about how CDX could fuel your permanent hires or how Global Source could offer you a global talent strategy, then feel free to reach out. And now let's get back to this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's things, technology, things where we're passionate about, but there's not a way to monetize those necessarily, right? But yeah, it's we're not driven by, making sure that the stock is up a quarter of a point, next quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously have targets, and financial expectations, right, within the business. And so we keep, as you would imagine, like any business would, we keep a very close eye on that kind of stuff. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's about doing what's right for the customer. It's about, we're not selling widgets. And
Yeah.
we have to remind ourselves too that we're not a technology company. We're a services people company is what we are. And, yeah, without the technology, we don't have a lot of value to offer other than some consulting. But um, we both need each other, right? The technology needs us and vice versa.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess on that customer point, what's the what are the key trends that you're seeing in your customers? What are the sort of the leading conversations that you and your team are having with your customers at the moment or over the last year or so?
Nearly all around cybersecurity. Well, yeah.
So I guess keeping on that sort of client track, what are the sort of key things that you're having conversations with customers about right now?
Well, cybersecurity has dominated that conversation almost entirely for the last 4 or 5 years. If we were trying to go in and drive a conversation around just traditional help desk managed IT, it wouldn't have gone very far. And really, the prevailing thing these days is data privacy, data governance, AI readiness. It's a
Yeah,
big one. There's ChatGPT, there's Copilot, there's Claude, there's I mean, there's lots of great tools out there, and there's
I think I've used all of those ones that you've listed this week, maybe even today.
yeah, no, that's great, man. That's great because I think AI is just an interesting conversation, right? We could talk about that for an hour alone, but um, there's a fear around AI that it's going to automate jobs away and things like that. And certainly, yeah, there's there's just certain jobs that should be, right? It's just part of the natural evolution of technology and society, in my belief, right? But I think you mentioned you've used 4 of those this week alone, right? I have myself. And it's people like us, and I think a lot of technologists will start, right, because it's technology, it's kind of natural to us, but is that these tools will make us super powered. And so there's going to be so much innovation. It's exciting to think about the innovation that's going to happen. There's the doom and gloom Skynet, scenario,
Yeah.
Terminator, but then there's also this world that I see that's more likely to occur where AI tools like this allow us to do even better, faster, right? More amazing things and offer a lot more value to our customers. And so there's a lot of conversation around AI, and of course, the privacy and the concerns around data governance. And so we're doing a lot more with Microsoft's Purview subscription, bringing it
Yeah.
back to Microsoft again. They've had this E5 compliance add-on for quite some time, but it hasn't been as relevant or needed for many of the small, medium-sized business set, unless they're really under some type of compliance requirement. But if you look at cybersecurity, insurance premiums, and policies, and there's just a lot more scrutiny, right, from key vendors. Hey, we want to win this new contract with this customer, but they're requiring us to do all of these things that we're not doing. We have to chin a higher bar now. And so we're having a lot more conversations around compliance, and not necessarily compliance that you think of like CMMC or SOC 2 or HIPAA, but more around compliance around a best practice.
Yeah.
And so we are following we're using our North Star uh, is like the CIS controls, NIST frameworks. Um, so if you look at these kind of basic frameworks, they go over a lot of these best practices that really touch on the things that are most important for a small, medium-sized business that isn't necessarily required by law to be compliant, but they're to stay competitive, right? And to keep those key contracts, they have to maintain a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where a lot of the conversations are today.
So that compliance piece, it's for your client organizations, it's about being able to stay engaged with ultimately their end customers or their suppliers and their vendors, because they're getting required from outside to be compliant with whatever that customer or supplier wants. So to be able to
Yeah,
continue those revenue streams, and they're having to deal with the compliance bit. Now that's interesting. And yeah, the other piece, and you mentioned it briefly, is, and I think especially in that sort of SMB set space, is if you want to even start thinking about touching Copilot, you've got to have your data compliance totally
that's
wrapped up
right.
before you get anywhere near it, because you could quite easily, go into Admin Center now, get your Copilot license, turn it on for everyone in the business, but then all of a
Yeah,
sudden, Jeff in accounts can go look at Sally in insurances, all of their personal information, or,
payroll.
or their
Yeah,
payroll or contracts or whatever it is. So before you get to that, whilst it's great that it can be so easily implemented on paper, you've got to do all the back end work, all the governance, all the controls, all the sensitivity labeling before you get to the point of actually implementing Copilot.
yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right. And we had and still do waves of people coming, especially when Copilot first came out. Of hey, can we buy a Copilot license? Can you turn this on? Can you assign it to these five people? And so we took a very cautious approach, like you're saying. What Microsoft's not really advertising in the marketing, is that there's a lot of risk and there's some things you need to be thinking about before you turn those things on. So yeah, with around the purview and compliance conversation, tools like SharePoint DSPM, the data security posture management, um, there's some great tools there now that allow us to go and assess even across multi-cloud storage. It doesn't have to just be SharePoint, and see where sensitive data is, who's accessing it, how often, where is it being moved around. Um, so it's allowing customers and ourselves as well be prepared and confident to be able to turn on and leverage AI tools. But yeah, Microsoft actually, their Defender product for cloud tracks generative AI apps by category. And so we've offered, and we have a lot of clients that just wholesale turn that off. They've asked us, we just want to block any AI tool, within our organization from being used. We just don't, until we understand it better, we don't want anybody using ChatGPT and uploading stuff they don't realize they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Um, and then we also have the ability now to track, we can allow, say, access to ChatGPT, but we can actually monitor every single prompt that users within the organization are putting into ChatGPT. And much like data privacy, data governance, right, we can monitor those prompts and look for, potential data, right, sensitive data leakage, and even look for disposition changes within employees based on, email conversations and chats. And so there's a little bit of Big Brother-ish component there to it, um, but I think, again, from a risk, from a compliance standpoint, as often as you might see a breach coming in from the outside or ransomware gang or something, there's a lot of insider risk going on too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
You know,
that's one of the big things as well is that um, you know, while organizations get to a point where they are happy with what AI solutions they have implemented as a business, because AI tools are so easy to access, where the big risk is, like you say, is it's every individual person potentially within an organization has their own shadow AI tech stack that they're using, which
yeah,
is not controlled or governed necessarily unless you have the right controls in place by the business. So it's this balancing act, isn't it, of controlling what you can control as an organisation. I think as well part of it is being really open with your teams and with your employees about where you're at on that AI journey. If you are a business where you are having to restrict access to things like ChatGPT, like be really clear and communicate with your team why is that. You're not just blocking it for the
yeah,
sake of it, like a school teacher, but what are the risks and why is that there? And the fact that as a business you have got a roadmap to get to a point where we can all leverage these types of tools, but we might be 3 or 6 months away from that. But when we get there, we can do it in a really safe and controlled manner and reduce the risk for everyone.
yeah. No, absolutely. And we want to see people turn these tools on, right? It's not that we don't. Back to the education component we talked about, and to your point, helping clients understand why you should either turn this off or not, right? But the sooner these businesses embrace these types of tools and do it in a responsible, right, safe way, in terms of having their house organized, right, and their data organized and protected in the right ways. We want to get our clients ready for AI. It could be a big differentiator for them. And so
Well,
again, it's
that's
a
the
it's a
thing, isn't it?
technology, right?
It's opening up that competitive advantage for your clients, isn't it? I had a
Yeah.
conversation with a guy based in the UK called Tim Callahan a few weeks ago. He's a Microsoft practice director for IBM in the UK and Ireland, and we came up with a really good analogy, which is we're at this inflection point of AI, which is a big technology transformation. But if you roll it all the way back hundreds of years to the printing press, and you've got two newspapers that are both manual newspaper print, and at the invention of the printing press, one of them adopts the printing press and one of them doesn't. There's only one of those businesses that is going to accelerate away and have a competitive advantage over the other one. And it's a very similar scenario with AI, is that it's a massive innovation lever that you can pull as an organization if you do it in the right way at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting, it's a game-changing technology that's still looking for problems to solve. Uh, I think it's similar to, cloud and that term and how it was loosely used, um,
Yeah,
a decade ago and longer, right? Is hey, we want to move to the cloud. Our board, says that we need to be adopting cloud. And I'm talking, back in 2010, 2012, when, yeah, there was cloud, like, but Microsoft 365 didn't exist, Azure didn't exist, AWS didn't exist. There were cloud storage options, there were some offsite backup, it was just a very loose term, right?
yeah.
And so, but like to your, like you had mentioned earlier, people are going to adopt it eventually once it becomes more clear and more consumable. And I think that's exactly where we're at with AI right now for most small, medium-sized businesses out there, is that it's a really neat technology. we need to be using AI in our business. Well, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah.
What specifically are you trying to solve? What problem? And I think those are clear for some businesses right now. For others, they're not as clear. But absolutely, if you fast forward 5 or 10 years, if we're not adopting that printing press, as you put it, if these businesses aren't, then they're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
And one thing that's going to hold them back is this whole data, governance piece, and just making sure that's all handled appropriately and managed, the way it needs to be. So yeah, I think that's the big, next frontier for us. As much as we've spent time fortifying the perimeters and, looking at the outside as the risk, we're looking at the inside as much as we are the outside these days.
Yeah.
Um, and we have some amazing tools that allow us to do that now too. So, and they're just becoming more usable, and again, they're under that Microsoft hood that many of our customers are already driving. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess if we swing it back round to you, Shane, to sort of start closing out. I mean, I guess if you looked in the sort of short to near future in the next sort of 2 to 3 years, what are the big sort of goals, aspirations for you as a leader and for the business over the next few years?
well, I think first of all is growth, right? In the
Yeah,
business, we want to continue adding customers and seats, and we have some targets around that. Getting this purview as a service, right, or managed compliance kind of piece or add-on piece to what we're already doing. We're going to market with that now, and that's something I expect to be, pretty successful over the next few years. We'll hopefully see a lot of adoption around that. Um, the other thing is just development. I want to. We're putting a lot of effort and investment into training our people and getting them certified, and so we have a pretty good stable of Microsoft certified folks here, and emerging leaders. And so, as a leader here within the business, that's the most exciting thing to me is to see people really just embrace this stuff and do so well with it, and do so well with our customers too. Um, so yeah, I think it's our big thing is to not revolutionize the business, but evolve. Um,
yeah,
really double down at what we're good at, and potentially stop doing some of the things that are becoming more just distractions than anything else. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then if you had to you could jump in your time machine and with what you know now and maybe a few more grey hairs in the beard, go and talk to Shane jumping out of university and starting out the journey 23, 24 years ago. Would there be a bit of advice that you say, Shane, you need to know this now?
yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of things, right? Buy some Bitcoin, that might be one.
Yeah, loads of it. Yeah,
I only say that because, when we were dealing with ransomware back in the middle 2010s, we'd have to go buy Bitcoin and didn't know what it was. And we had dozens of these things, that were a couple $100 a piece that we were using just to make these bad guys go away so we could unlock our customers' data. This was the fledgling years of ransomware. But yeah, that's
yeah,
one. I mean, I think overall, I would say don't sweat the small stuff as much. There's that whole 80/20 rule, right, in life. The Pareto principle, I can't remember the actual name of it, but spent some time trying to make things perfect, right, and smooth and sand and whittle them down to what, is this perfect vision. And sometimes it's just rolling your sleeves up and getting out there, and where we've done that, we've been really greatly successful. So,
yeah.
um,
Cool. No, awesome. Well, I did warn you about this last bit. Should we jump into Microsoft Mentors quickfire round?
okay, well, I'm here for it. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it'll be all super, super easy for you. So if we start off with, I quite like this one. What do you think? What's your sort of most underrated Microsoft product? What's something that you use that you think actually more people should be using this?
Microsoft underrated product. I'd say Microsoft Planner. Um, I use the heck out of it. I was a big Trello user for a long time.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of the Kanban style boards. For me, that method works, and with just all the things I have to manage and our various teams do, Planner has been a really great tool um, for us. I think it's more adopted now than it was, but I know for a long time it was
yeah,
not very heavily used, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
live my life in planner every morning. Up we come,
yeah,
get planner up, and off we go.
yeah. I guess a runner-up would be Microsoft Lists. Um, we do quite a bit in lists and gotten pretty deep in that, and for just a simple little microservice there, and that's been pretty helpful. So.
Yeah, yeah. And next question, you mentioned earlier on, you sort of like your podcast and then you learning your YouTube side of things. Is there a person, a podcast that you think sort of helped shape your outlook and your leadership style?
Yeah, I there's quite a few I follow. I would say John Seville, the legendary, man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah,
I learned a
most
lot from
famous for his
him.
appearance on Microsoft Mentors, the podcast.
I
Mate.
was gonna say I'm not. I
I
don't
think
feel
that's what
worthy to
broke
be
him.
in
That's what
this.
made him famous.
Right, yeah, absolutely right. I don't feel worthy to be in this seat, following a man like him. We do use the same barber, if you haven't
Yeah,
noticed. Yeah,
yeah.
both very handsome. But yeah, there was a specific channel. I need to make a shout out to a gentleman, Nick Ross, Cloud Capsule T minus 365. Um, he was pushing out content around Microsoft 365 and stuff back in 2020 when there was very little information, and it was specifically kind of focused for MSPs. And so followed him and followed his blog for quite some time. Um, but yeah, I track a lot of different technology podcasts and security podcasts. There's one that's been around forever called Security Now, Steve Gibson, Leo Laporte, the whole Twit network. Um,
Yeah.
and
Have you ever come across a guy from the UK called the bearded M365 guy?
actually, I was gonna Jonathan Edwards,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
was gonna bring him up because I don't know if you guys know each other or have met or,
I've been
but
I've been trying to get if you're listening, Jonathan, we need to get our podcast
okay.
booked. We just can't quite get the dates lined up. I'm gonna get him.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that you try to get him on here too because he'd be fantastic. I think he's I love his sense of humor. And he's made his videos even more. He's worked that into, his videos even more over the years, the last couple of years. But yeah, Jonathan, I track him quite a bit, and yeah, he puts out some great stuff.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Cool. And then a couple more final quick fire ones. And I always like to see if this unpicks any hidden traitors in the mix of the Microsoft world. When it comes
Uh-oh.
to laptops and PCs, are you Windows or Mac?
Oh boy. I've got a Windows 11 PC, a Dell.
Yeah,
But my laptop is an Apple iPad.
yeah.
I haven't
Okay.
gone MacBook, but I'm AirPod, I'm Apple Watch, and I got the Apple ecosystem going pretty strong for like the personal stuff.
Yeah,
But
that's what I tend to find.
I'm a Windows user.
That's what I
Yeah.
tend to find. People are Windows, Microsoft in their work life, and then Apple ecosystem in their personal life. Um, if, if
Yeah.
if only Microsoft had nailed the Windows phone, and then we could have maybe all been in the Microsoft world all the
Oh
way through. But they just didn't quite nail it. Did
man. Yeah, they did. I mean, that iPhone is silky smooth. It just works. And so, yeah, but I can't get away from a Windows machine. I just can't. I do too much tinkering. And I know you can do a lot on a Mac OS now, but I'm still a Windows guy. I guess that's the ultimate answer.
they? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But,
If you hadn't ended up working in tech, what else do you think you might have ended up doing?
You know, I probably would have tried to get into development, specifically probably gaming, which that's a really tough industry. I feel bad for a lot of those really talented people because it's such a tumultuous, studios close and just
Yeah,
there's just a lot of deadline. But I love gaming. I grew up in that and just I love the idea of designing, right, world and art. And so for me, it would have been something following a technology slash art kind of track there.
yeah.
And, I think the other big passion for me would probably be a musician, another starving career. So I
I
think
think you
from
made the
a
right choice.
financial standpoint, I made the right decision,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. But but yeah, I often think about what I do next, whatever next looks like and whenever next is. But I always tell myself it'll be something completely, outdoors, opposite of technology, no screens, but I know me, back to the technologist, I'm gonna keep tinkering. I'm gonna keep hammering away. I'll find something that will keep me engaged with the bits and bytes.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. And then final one of the quick fire round. So it's Friday night, work's done, it's out the way. You're going out to your favourite restaurant or going to get a takeaway. What's your go to cuisine and meal? What's your
oh
top one?
man, comfort food, it's pizza. I
Yeah,
just love pizza. Yeah. So pizza or sushi, those are the two.
yeah. No big Texas barbecue grill steakhouse.
Oh man, well, I will say, I mean, we eat a lot of barbecue down here, and so if you've never been to Texas or had, beef brisket like they do it here, ooh, it's good stuff. It's just heavy, you can't you
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
can't do it all the time. Um, but yeah, pizza's my go-to. I could eat pizza just about every day. Even when it's bad, it's still kind of good. So,
yeah. Exactly. Well, Shane, thanks very much for your time. It's been awesome to hear a bit more about you, a bit more about GCS, and I'll when the podcast goes out, it goes out across LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube, as listeners will know, and I'll make sure that Shane and GCS are connected, and anyone that's in the Texas region, reach out to Shane. I'm sure it'd be good to get you connected with some people around where you are as well.
yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, Ollie, and enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, always looking to build the network and meet new folks, and always love talking shop too.
Yeah,
So yeah, if you're in the area, hit me up. Um, I'm easy to
100%.
find. So,
Well, have a great rest of your day, Shane, and we'll catch up soon.
all right, you too, Ollie. Thanks so
Cheers.
much.